All right, so are you ready for this? We're diving into the Black Dahlia case today.
Ooh, yeah. This is a big one.
A real head scratcher, and we're going deep using the FBI's files.
Straight from the source. I love it.
The thing is, and this is what makes it so fascinating, it's still unsolved.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. Maybe we'll find some of those pieces today. What do you think?
We can certainly try.
Yeah.
You know, this case still captures the public's imagination even after all these years.
For sure. And how it all started, well, it was like something out of a nightmare. Just picture this. It's Los Angeles, January 15th, 1947. It seems like a pretty normal morning.
Right.
A mother's walking with her child, and they stumble upon a body.
Oh.
But this wasn't just anybody. This was 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, brutally murdered and left in a vacant lot.
And the details are, well, they're pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
The body was sliced in half at the waist. Yeah. And then posed, almost theatrically, you could say, a few feet from the sidewalk.
It's chilling. And here's a major clue. There was no blood at the scene.
Meaning?
It tells us right away that the murder didn't happen there. Whoever did this moved the body after committing the crime somewhere else.
That level of planning, it's unsettling.
Totally. So the LAPD, they knew this wasn't going to be easy. They called in the FBI for help.
Makes sense?
And get this, they used this cutting-edge technology. It was called sound photo at the time.
Did a photo.
The FBI identified Elizabeth Short in just 56 minutes.
56 minutes. Wow. That's incredible, especially for 1947.
Right. That was revolutionary back then. The sound photo thing allowed them to, transmit fingerprints over long distances almost instantly.
Game changer for law enforcement.
Absolutely. Shows you how serious they were about this case right from the start. And remember how I said it was like a puzzle?
Yeah.
Well, the FBI starts putting things together. Turns out Elizabeth Short's fingerprints were already in their database. Not once, but twice.
You know, it's impressive that even with this super fast ID, the FBI didn't just stop there. They really dug into Elizabeth Short's life.
So what did they find?
One set of prints was from a job application she had filled out.
Okay.
And the other set was from an arrest. She had been arrested for underage drinking.
Wow.
They even gave her mugshot to the press, which, of course, that fueled public interest even more.
Totally. And this is where it gets even more interesting. The FBI wasn't just helping with the ID. They were diving deep into the investigation itself.
Right.
They ran all sorts of record checks on potential suspects, looked at their backgrounds, their connections to Elizabeth Short, you name it. They even did interviews all across the country.
They were thorough. I'll give them that.
And they were meticulous. They looked at every possible angle. They were really interested in a group of USC medical students, for instance.
Medical students? Why medical students?
Yeah. Well, because of the way Elizabeth Short's body was dismembered. It was so precise. The theory was that the killer might have had some anatomical knowledge, like surgical skills.
Ah, I see. Of course, this was 1947, long before DNA analysis and all the modern forensics we have today.
Right. So investigating medical students made sense, but the techniques back then, for analyzing cuts and comparing them to surgical procedures, nowhere near as advanced as they are now.
Makes you wonder what they could have found out with today's technology.
Totally. So they were looking at medical students, doing background checks, conducting interviews. Anything else in those FBI files?
Let's see. Oh, yeah, they even got this anonymous letter. They thought it might be from the killer.
Whoa.
They tried to match the fingerprints on it, but no luck.
No match.
They also tried handwriting analysis, which was a pretty common tool back then. They were hoping to get some insight into the killer's personality and background from their writing style.
Fascinating. So even with all that effort, the Black Dahlia murder remains unsolved to this day.
It really shows you sometimes, even with all the resources of the FBI, some cases just stay shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what makes this case so captivating. Even after all these decades, we're still left with so many unanswered questions.
It's true. It's almost like the lack of a definitive answer has made the story even more compelling. People can fill in the blanks with their own theories. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's shift gears a little bit. How about we talk about
the impact of the Black Dahlia case on popular culture?
Yeah.
I mean, it's become a true crime legend, hasn't it?
It really has. So many books, movies, TV shows, even video games inspired by it.
It's crazy.
Everyone seems to have their own theory about who did it. But before we get into all that, I'm curious, what was it about this case that captured everyone's attention so much?
Well, I think there are a few things at play here. First, you have the victim herself, Elizabeth Short.
Yep.
Young, aspiring actress, beautiful, full of dreams.
The whole Hollywood story.
Exactly. Her story, it was resonated with people, especially in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So many people come here chasing fame.
Yeah.
Her tragic end, it became a kind of cautionary tale, I guess. A reminder of the dark side of the City of Angels.
It's like the case shattered the illusion of Hollywood glamour,
Yeah.
revealed a darker reality underneath.
Exactly. And then you have the brutality of the crime itself, the way her body was mutilated, posed. It's shocking, even by today's standards.
Gruesome.
And the crime scene photos, even though they were limited back then, they were all over the press. People saw those images, and they stuck with them.
It's like it tapped into some primal fear, like makes you look over your shoulder and wonder what's lurking in the shadows.
Right. And then there's the mystery, the unanswered questions. Who is this killer? Why did they do it? What was it about Elizabeth Short? And the fact that it's still unsolved after all this time just adds to the intrigue.
People love a good mystery.
They do. And this one has all the elements. A beautiful victim, a brutal crime, a shadowy killer, no clear answers. It's a perfect recipe for a true crime obsession.
Like a puzzle everyone wants to solve, but the pieces just don't fit. And you mentioned the impact on popular culture, countless books, movies, TV shows. Do you think that's partly because the lack of a definitive answer lets people project their own ideas onto the story?
Oh, absolutely. When there's a void, people tend to fill it with their own ideas, their own fears, their own fascinations. The Black Dahlia case, it becomes like a blank canvas. People can paint their own version of events, their own theories about the killer and the motives.
That's a really interesting way to put it, a blank canvas. So what are some of the most common theories out there? I'm sure our listener has heard a few.
Oh, there are tons. Some are plausible, some are outlandish. You've got everything from serial killer theories to Hollywood cover-up conspiracies.
Like maybe she was involved in some kind of scandal and her death was meant to silence her.
Right, exactly. Some people think she might have been the victim of the lipstick killer, the one who was active in Chicago around the same time.
Oh, yeah.
And then you always have those theories about secret societies and whatnot. It's a real rabbit hole.
It is. But it's important to remember at the end of the day, we're talking about a real person here, a young woman whose life was tragically cut short. It's important to separate the facts from the fiction, the evidence from the speculation.
Absolutely.
Speaking of separating fact from fiction, I think it's worth addressing some of the myths and misconceptions that have popped up around the Black Dahlia case.
Okay.
For example, a lot of people think Elizabeth Short was nicknamed the Black Dahlia while she was alive, but that's not true, is it?
No, it's a good example of how the facts can get twisted over time. The nickname, the Black Dahlia, actually came from the press. They gave it to her after her death. It was a play on the title of a film noir movie that was popular at the time, The Blue Dahlia.
Right.
The press, they loved to sensationalize things back then. And that nickname, it definitely added to the drama surrounding her murder.
It did, and it really stuck. It's almost like the name itself became a symbol of the whole mystery.
For sure. And it reminds us that we need to be careful when we engage with true crime. The way a story is framed, the language used, the images presented, it all shapes how we see the case and the victim.
It's a good point. We have to be critical thinkers, question what we're told, and try to look at things from different angles.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the impact on popular culture, the theories, the myths, but let's go back to the FBI's involvement for a moment. You mentioned how thorough their investigation was. Can you give us some more specific examples?
Sure. One of the things that really struck me was just how wide-ranging their investigation was. They weren't just focused on LA, they were following leads all over the country.
Wow.
And remember, this was long before the internet and easy access to information. They had to rely on phone calls, telegrams, they had to physically travel to interview people and check records.
It must have been a logistical nightmare. What kind of records were they checking?
Anything they could get their hands on. Criminal records, military records, employment records, you name it. They were looking for anything that could give them a lead. They even looked into people who wrote letters claiming to be the killer. Tried to figure out if any of those confessions were real.
It's amazing how dedicated they were, even back then. They really used every tool they had to try and solve this case. Did they ever come close to finding the killer?
There were a few persons of interest over the years, people who seemed to fit the profile or had some connection to Elizabeth Short, but nothing concrete ever came up. The FBI investigated every lead, but they always hit a dead end.
It's like the killer just disappeared.
That's the thing with cold cases. Sometimes the trail just goes cold,
Yeah.
even with the best investigators. Doesn't mean it's closed, though.
True.
The FBI, they actually made all their files on the Black Dahlia public,
Really?
hoping that somebody out there might see something, have that missing piece of the puzzle, you know?
That's incredible. It's like a giant crowdsourced investigation then.
Pretty much. Anyone could have information that could crack the case wide open.
So anyone listening right now could hold the key.
Exactly. That's what's so compelling about this case. It's not just history. It's an active investigation.
Still going on.
The FBI is still getting tips, following up on them. Who knows? Maybe one of those tips will lead to the killer.
Makes you think, what does all this mean for someone listening right now?
Well, it means you're not just hearing a story, you're part of a real-life mystery, still unfolding.
Wow.
By learning about this case, thinking about the evidence, you're joining this search for the truth.
That's powerful. You're not just listening, you're an active participant. You could be the one to notice something, connect the dots in a way nobody else has.
You got it. And it shows how important collaboration is, not just between law enforcement, but with the public, too. Could be a tip from someone like you that solves it.
It reminds us that sometimes justice, it takes time and a lot of effort from everyone. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier, how the Black Dahlia case impacts how we think about justice and closure. It's not just about the loss of a life, it's the loss of answers.
It really makes you think about what justice actually is, right? When a case stays unsolved, it's unsettling for everyone, the victim's loved ones, but for all of us, too.
Definitely unsettling.
It challenges our ideas about the world. Sometimes the truth is just out of reach.
It makes you wonder, what if we had today's technology back in 1947? DNA analysis, databases, facial recognition. Could they have caught the killer then?
It's a question a lot of people ask. It's tempting to think about what we could find out with today's tools.
Me too think. But even without all that, the investigators back then, they were dedicated, resourceful. They did what they could.
They did. And who knows, their work might lead to a resolution someday.
I hope so for Elizabeth Short and everyone affected by this. So as you keep learning about the Black Dahlia case, think about this. What does this case tell us? What lessons can we learn? And how can we, all of us, work towards a world where these things don't happen, and if they do, that justice is served?
Big questions, important ones.
This deep dive, it's taken us to some dark places. But it's also shown how resilient we are, how much we want to find the truth, and how fascinated we are by the unknown.
Absolutely.
The Black Dahlia case, it might be unsolved, but it's a story that still grabs us, challenges us, reminds us that some mysteries, even without answers, can change how we see the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, the investigation is still going on. If you have any information, even if it seems small, tell the FBI. You might be the one to unlock this mystery after all these years.
That's right. And if you want to learn more, the FBI website is the place to go. Documents, photos, recordings, it's like stepping back in time and a chance to be part of this search for justice.
So keep digging, keep asking questions. The Black Dahlia case is a real labyrinth, and the journey is just as important as the destination. You never know what you might find.
On that note, we'll leave you to ponder the mysteries of the Black Dahlia. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.